Jesse James is a figure shrouded in controversy in American history, seen by some as the epitome of villainy and by others as a folk hero. His life was deeply influenced by the Civil War, a conflict that left an indelible mark on him, fueling his thirst for revenge against those who defeated the South. Turning to a life of crime, Jesse became the most legendary outlaw of the Wild West, driven by a singular goal: revenge. Born on September 5, 1847 in Clay County, Missouri, Jesse was raised in a modest household by his parents, Robert and Zerelda James, alongside his siblings, Frank and Susan. The family made a living through hemp production and, like many in the South, relied on slavery. In 1848, the rumors of vast riches in the American West sparked the gold rush, leading Robert James to seek his fortune in California. Tragically, he fell ill and passed away in 1850, leaving young Jesse orphaned at the age of 3. Zerelda, a resilient woman, was left to raise her children alone, facing financial hardship and eventually having to entrust them to another family. Zerelda remarried Dr. Reuben Samuel in 1855, bringing her family back together and providing stability. However, Jesse's adolescence was interrupted by the outbreak of the Civil War in 1860, plunging him into a conflict that would shape the rest of his life. Jesse James's life became a relentless cycle of conflict, driven by an unyielding thirst for revenge. The Civil War erupted in 1861 following Abraham Lincoln's election, a Republican intent on abolishing slavery. Decades of economic, political, and cultural tensions between the northern and southern states culminated in secession threats from the South upon Lincoln's victory. The James family, staunch supporters of Southern values and owners of 7 slaves, naturally aligned with the Confederate cause. When Frank, Jesse's elder brother at 18, enlisted to fight for the Confederacy, Jesse, then only 13, was too young to join him. Frank's war experience was brief as he was captured by Union troops and later released on parole. Meanwhile, Missouri found itself torn between Unionists and Confederates, embroiled in guerrilla warfare between the bushwhackers supporting the Southern cause and the Jayhawkers loyal to the Union. In 1863, Frank returned to the fray, joining a squad operating in Clay County. During this time, Union soldiers raided the James farm, suspecting Frank's presence. Zerelda, deeply committed to the secessionist cause, welcomed Frank and his comrades warmly. 15-year-old Jesse, longing to join his brother, was repeatedly denied due to his age. However, when Union troops raided their farm and subjected Jesse to mistreatment, it fueled his resentment further. Frank, evading Union capture, eventually joined William Quantrill's guerrilla squad, where he encountered Cole Younger. Together, they engaged in ambushes and retaliatory actions against those who had wronged them, setting the stage for Jesse's eventual plunge into the world of outlawry. Frank James initially followed William Quantrill until the spring of 1864 before joining Fletch Taylor's bushwhacker squad. It was with Taylor that 16-year-old Jesse James first entered the conflict alongside other young guerrillas like Little Archie Clement, who soon earned Jesse's admiration. Joining Taylor's group meant Jesse had to swiftly adapt to the harsh realities of war, where survival often depended on ruthless tactics. Every encounter became a test of endurance and a struggle for survival, blurring the lines between ally and adversary. Despite initial doubts about Jesse's abilities, his determination and skill quickly earned him respect among his peers. Driven by a burning desire for revenge, Jesse sought out those who had wronged him, particularly the militiamen who had mistreated him and his family. Eventually, Jesse and Frank parted ways with Taylor's squad in search of a more formidable leader, leading them to William Anderson, known as Bloody Bill, and his notorious band of bushwhackers. Under Anderson's command, Jesse found himself drawn deeper into a world of brutality and fear. Inspired by his mentors, Jesse sought to emulate their ruthless tactics, earning a reputation for his own acts of violence. Witnessing atrocities like Anderson's gruesome torture of prisoners only fueled Jesse's thirst for vengeance and his quest for respect among his peers. In the summer of 1864, Jesse suffered a severe injury while attempting to steal a saddle. The bullet wound inflicted significant pain, leading Jesse to contemplate his own mortality and expressing a desire for capture by Union forces to end his suffering. The injury Jesse sustained turned out to be less severe than feared. Miraculously, the bullet missed any vital organs, allowing him to return to action within a month. Fast forward to September 27, 1864, one of the darkest chapters of the Civil War unfolds in Centralia, Missouri. led by the ruthless guerrilla squad of Bloody Bill Anderson, of which Jesse and Frank are members. Centralia, a strategic hub centered around a Union cargo depot, becomes the scene of a brutal massacre orchestrated by Anderson and his men. With 80 guerrillas, including Jesse and Frank, they seize the town, looting and blocking the railroad tracks. When a locomotive approaches, they ambush it, segregating the passengers, mostly Union soldiers on leave, from civilians. Anderson issues a chilling decree, sparing no quarter for the Union soldiers, vowing to kill each one like a dog. His men open fire, mercilessly slaughtering the soldiers, scalping and mutilating their bodies before setting the train ablaze. The massacre shocks the region, but Anderson's reign of terror is short-lived as he falls victim to an ambush soon after. Following Anderson's demise, the James brothers go their separate ways. Frank reunites with General Quantrill in Kentucky, while Jesse heads to Texas under the command of Archie Clement, Anderson's former lieutenant. Jesse, now 17, faces yet another brush with death when he is seriously wounded during an attempt to surrender near Lexington, Missouri. A bullet lodges in his right lung, a haunting reminder of the brutality of war. It takes Jesse several months to recover, and during his convalescence, the Civil War draws to a close. The conflict leaves behind a divided nation, with 620,000 lives lost and the Union emerging victorious over the Confederate States. The era of Reconstruction begins, signaling the end of slavery and the start of a tumultuous period of rebuilding for the South. The state of Missouri, where the James family resides, bears the brutal scars of the Civil War. The conflict between rebels and Unionists has transformed the Midwestern lands into a landscape of fire and bloodshed. Nearly 1 in 3 citizens has suffered grievously, whether through combat, targeted violence, forced displacement, or seeking refuge in safer havens. By the close of 1865, the James brothers return home to reunite with their family. Jesse has recuperated from his wounds, but the bitter taste of defeat and its aftermath linger. The war may have ended, but Jesse's thirst for vengeance burns unabated. The conflict not only shattered his nation, but also left his family destitute. For Jesse, laying down arms is inconceivable. He is driven by a singular purpose: to reclaim what he believes is rightfully his. As winter yields to spring in 1866, the James brothers find themselves back on the family farm, grappling with the harsh reality of rebuilding their lives. Determined to resist the oppressive presence of Union soldiers in their territory, Jesse devises a plan for retribution. Recognizing that banks hold the wealth of the North even within Southern territory, Jesse sees them as ripe targets to strike back at his adversaries. The lack of robust security measures makes them particularly vulnerable. Thus, Jesse, alongside his brother and former war comrades, including the influential Archie Clement, orchestrates what would go down in history as the first daylight armed bank robbery in peacetime America. Their target, the Clell County Savings Association in Liberty, Missouri, owned by a staunch Unionist. On February 13, 1866, the bandits execute their plan, making off with a staggering $60,000, equivalent to nearly $1 million today. Their daring heist claims the life of a passerby as they make their escape, sending shockwaves throughout the nation. As much driven by political symbolism as by financial gain, Jesse James achieved his first act of revenge against the North with the daring bank robbery. The Unionist bank owner's fury sparked a $5,000 bounty on the heads of the criminals, thrusting Jesse into the spotlight as a wanted fugitive for the first time. However, tragedy strikes, further fueling Jesse's animosity towards the Northerners. His mentor and close companion, Archie Clement, falls victim to the state militia on December 13, 1866, leaving Jesse shattered by the loss. It takes him considerable time to come to terms with the devastating blow, but from that moment on, Jesse steps up to fill the void, seizing control and ascending to newfound power. Unbeknownst to the nation, Jesse James is poised to shake the very foundations of society. In the wake of Archie's demise, Jesse and his cohorts continue their spree of armed robberies, targeting banks over the ensuing years. One such heist unfolds in early March 1868, marking another audacious chapter in Jesse's burgeoning criminal career. In a departure from their previous exploits with political undertones, the James brothers, accompanied by Cole Younger and 4 other former guerrillas, set their sights on a bank in Russellville, Kentucky, rumored to be a lucrative and vulnerable target. Unlike their earlier heist, This one is purely driven by the allure of wealth. After meticulous planning, the bandits spring into action during the robbery, resulting in the unfortunate shooting of a Russellville citizen. Despite the violence, they make off with a substantial haul of $9,000 in cash and $3,000 in gold coins, a significant coup for the gang. Their next target, the Daviess County Savings Association in Gallatin, Missouri, becomes the stage for Jesse James's notorious emergence into the spotlight. On December 7, 1869, at precisely 12:30, Jesse calmly dismounts from his horse, raising no suspicion among the townsfolk. Upon entering the bank, his gaze fixates on an employee seated near the safe, seemingly searching for a specific individual. Moments later, Jesse's intentions become chillingly clear as he draws a revolver from beneath his coat, leveling it at the unsuspecting cashier. With a declaration of revenge for his fallen brother, Bill Anderson, Jesse pulls the trigger, believing the man before him to be Samuel Cox, the alleged orchestrator of Anderson's demise. However, in a tragic case of mistaken identity, Jesse fatally shoots the cashier, mistaking him for Cox. Unaware of his error, Jesse fires a second shot, ensuring the man's demise before fleeing the scene, leaving behind a trail of blood and infamy that would forever cement his name in the annals of American outlaw history. As the victim's anguished cries pierce the air, the bandits hastily make their escape, seizing the deceased cashier's wallet before fleeing on horseback. Their flight is met with gunfire from the enraged townsfolk of Gallatin, narrowly avoiding the grim fate that awaited them. However, the ill-gotten gains from the robbery pale in comparison to the weight of guilt borne by Jesse James, who mistakenly believed he had avenged his friend Bloody Bill. Following the tragic events at Gallatin, Jesse James is branded an outlaw for the first time in the press, with Missouri Governor Thomas Crittenden offering a reward for his capture. It is in the aftermath of this notorious incident that the legend of Jesse James begins to take root, largely thanks to one man, John Newman Edwards, the founder of the Kansas City Times newspaper in Missouri. Edwards, a fervent supporter of the Confederate cause, sees in Jesse James a means to champion his political ideologies. Through his newspaper, Edwards elevates Jesse's exploits, publishing a plethora of letters purportedly authored by the outlaw himself. Initially asserting his innocence, Jesse's missives gradually evolve into impassioned political rhetoric, championing the Confederate cause and lambasting his adversaries. Describing Jesse, Edwards paints a portrait of a charismatic and affable individual, always ready with a smile or a kind word. Jesse's carefree demeanor belies the turmoil within as he navigates the treacherous landscape of post-war Missouri, a figure both feared and admired, shaping the course of American outlaw lore for generations to come. Frank James, with his quiet demeanor and lethal capabilities, understands all too well the bounty on his head, though it merely serves to irritate him. Meanwhile, Jesse James emerges as the embodiment of the outlaw with a political cause, a legend in the making. Later, the James brothers join forces with the Younger brothers, Cole, John, Jim, and Bob, to form the infamous James Younger Gang, which also includes Clell Miller and other former bushwhackers. With their combined prowess, the gang embarks on a spree of robberies, including one on June 3, 1871 in Corydon, Iowa. On that fateful day, Jesse, Frank, Cole Younger, and Clell Miller target the local bank, finding only the cashier present. The robbery proves effortless as they secure approximately $6,000 from the safe before nonchalantly passing by a gathering where a renowned orator addresses the crowd, drawing no attention to themselves. However, one member of the gang reaches his breaking point and confesses their crimes to the assembled crowd, prompting the bank's owner to enlist the services of Pinkerton's National Detective Agency to hunt down Jesse James and his cohorts. The James Younger Gang resurfaces in April 1872 to rob a bank in Columbia, Kentucky, with Jesse, Frank, Cole Younger, his brother John, and Clell Miller at the helm. This time the loot is modest, yielding between $600 and $1,500, but not without bloodshed as Jesse James and Cole Younger fatally shoot the bank teller during the heist. In September of the same year, the bandits struck again, this time targeting a safe at a fairground in Kansas City. Jesse James, along with Cole and John Younger, embarked on the heist, but the outcome was far from successful. Amidst the bustling crowds, they managed to secure only a paltry sum of about $900. Worse yet, during their frantic escape, they inadvertently trampled and killed a young girl with their horses. As time passed, the authorities remained unable to apprehend Jesse and his gang. Unbeknownst to them, Jesse James's thirst for revenge drove him to target the very arteries of Union commerce, the railroads. In the booming expansion of the 1870s, railroads were the lifelines of the nation, a development that Jesse saw as another form of Northern oppression against the South. With locomotives vulnerable and often poorly defended, they became prime targets for Confederate bandits like Jesse James. Their first train robbery occurred on July 21st, 1873, west of Adair, deep in Iowa. Jesse Frank, the younger brothers, along with Clell Miller, Charlie Pitts, and Bill Chadwell, set their sights on a remote section of the Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific Railroad. The chosen location for the robbery proves strategic, as the railroad curves at this point, naturally slowing down any approaching train. Armed with a crowbar and a hammer, the bandits set about sabotaging the tracks, positioning themselves about 15 meters away, anticipating the locomotive's arrival. At precisely 8:30 p.m., the steam engine chugs into view. With swift precision, the criminals activate their sabotage, pulling on a rope connected to a rail to divert it from the track. As the train rounds the curve and the rail is displaced, the locomotive lurches to a sudden halt, but it's too late. Gunfire erupts as the bandits open fire, causing chaos and overturning some of the cars. Tragically, the train engineer meets his demise on the spot, crushed beneath the weight of the locomotive. Stunned by the carnage they've unleashed, the gang wastes no time in executing their plan. In a bold and startling move, they don disguises that are as unexpected as they are chilling. Masks bearing the emblem of the Ku Klux Klan. Jesse takes charge of the operation, confronting the guard in the express car with a menacing ultimatum. Open the safe or face the consequences. Faced with the threat of violence, the guard complies, relinquishing the key to Jesse. However, the haul proves to be far smaller than anticipated, totaling only about $2,337. An underwhelming outcome for the audacious robbery, equivalent to roughly $50,000 in today's currency. Following the swift robbery, the bandits mount their horses and swiftly flee southward, the entire escapade lasting a mere 10 minutes. The stolen railway company offers a hefty sum of $5,000 for their capture, and the audacious crime captures headlines across the nation. During the heist, one of the outlaws reportedly addresses the passengers, asserting, "We're none of your petty thieves. We're bold robbers. We're robbing the rich for the poor. We don't want to hurt you." This proclamation seems to cast Jesse and his gang in the light of modern-day Robin Hoods, champions of the downtrodden workers against the affluent elites. However, their choice of attire, a Ku Klux Klan mask, provokes controversy among the American populace, given the organization's association with racism and violence. Nevertheless, Jesse James solidifies his reputation as a notorious outlaw, revered as a hero in the southern states. His unwavering dedication to the Confederate cause earns him admiration, exemplified by the stagecoach robbery between Malvern and Hot Springs, Arkansas, on January 15, 1874. During this daring raid, Jesse and his gang inadvertently target a Southern veteran, only to realize later that he had once fought for the Confederacy. In a gesture of respect, they promptly return his watch, declaring that they have no intention of stealing from fellow Confederate veterans. Instead, they assert that the injustices perpetrated by the North have driven them to their life of outlawry, and they intend to exact retribution. On January 31, 1874, the James Younger gang embarks on their second train robbery, this time in Gads Hill, Missouri. With the James brothers joined by Cole, John, and Bob Younger, the gang orchestrates their heist after observing several men loitering on the train station platform the night before. To execute their plan, the outlaws apprehend the men loitering at the station, binding them securely. Equipped with a red flag, a signal of impending danger, they patiently await the train's arrival, anticipating a hefty haul of cash. Despite enduring hours of bitter cold in the January chill, their determination remains unwavering. As the locomotive finally appears, tardy by an hour and a half, the bandits spring into action. One of them brandishes the flag, compelling the train to slow its pace. When the driver emerges to investigate, a bandit seizes him by the collar, pressing a gun to his temple. "Stay still or face dire consequences," the outlaw warns before addressing the passengers within earshot, threatening the conductor with death should any shots ring out. Like their previous heist in Iowa, the bandits conceal their identities behind Ku Klux Klan masks. Inside the train, the guard awaits nervously, armed and prepared for confrontation. When a masked figure appears, the guard raises his weapon only to find himself confronted by not one but two assailants. In a moment of terror, the guard surrenders his pistol upon demand, relinquishing the key to the safe. After securing their loot, amounting to roughly $1,080, the outlaws proceed to strip the passengers of their valuables, scrutinizing each man's hands before declaring their intention to target only the gentleman's money and jewelry. Once their plundering is complete, the bandits vanish into the night, disappearing into the darkness long before the locomotive resumes its journey. The audacious bandits had seized nearly $2,000 in total, leaving behind a bold statement for the local newspapers: the most daring robbery ever recorded. The southbound train on the Iron Mountain Railroad was robbed this morning by 5 heavily armed men and relieved of thousands of dollars. The meticulously detailed press release chronicled the events of the robbery, showcasing the seamless execution of their plan. With their second successful train heist under their belts, Jesse and his gang seemed unstoppable, growing bolder and more proficient with each endeavor. Meanwhile, the Adams Express Company, owner of the safe looted at Gad's Hill, sought the expertise of the renowned Pinkerton Detective Agency to apprehend the James Younger gang. Alan Pinkerton, the agency's founder and head, was already a household name, having gained prominence for his role in safeguarding President Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War and thwarting an assassination attempt against him. A staunch abolitionist, Pinkerton had established his agency in the 1850s, earning a reputation for relentless pursuit of justice. The Pinkerton Agency, often regarded as the precursor to modern intelligence organizations like the FBI and CIA, specialized in espionage and apprehending professional criminals. One of their notable achievements occurred in 1868 when they successfully captured and dismantled the Reno gang, notorious for perpetrating the first 3 train robberies during peacetime in U.S. history. Following the Gad's Hill robbery, the Adams Express Company turned to Alan Pinkerton, tasking him with the elimination of Jesse James. Pinkerton selected one of his top agents, Detective Joseph Witcher, for the mission. Witcher's objective was to infiltrate Clay County, gather intelligence on the James farm, and gather as much information as possible. However, his mission encountered unforeseen challenges upon arrival. Local law enforcement officials proved uncooperative, leaving Witcher with no option but to disguise himself as a farm laborer to gather intelligence clandestinely. Yet even with this guise, obtaining vital information proved arduous. Witcher, a northerner, found himself navigating hostile territory in Clay County. Jesse James commanded a significant network of supporters and sympathizers, especially in the South, where he was celebrated as a hero for avenging the Confederates through his audacious robberies. Adding to the challenge, Jesse James maintained an elusive presence, with few individuals able to accurately identify him. Those who hadn't grown up alongside him or fought alongside him knew little about his appearance. Consequently, the authorities relied on inconsistent and unreliable eyewitness descriptions, making the task of tracking down James all the more daunting. What's truly remarkable about all of this is that even his own son, whom he would have later, wouldn't know his real name. For Witcher, this task is far from straightforward. Yet through persistence, he eventually uncovers the crucial information he seeks: the whereabouts of the James farm. To infiltrate it, Witcher adopts the guise of a laborer in search of employment. Upon reaching the farm, Zerelda James warmly welcomes him, and Witcher presents his request to work in her fields. However, he fails to realize that his fair complexion and soft hands might give him away. Despite warnings from the former local sheriff, who cautioned him that the old woman would kill you if the boys don't, Witcher remains undeterred. What follows remains shrouded in mystery. All that is known is that Joseph Witcher is discovered fatally shot 3 times along a rural road in Jackson County. It's believed that 3 individuals, including Jesse James and his brother Frank, were involved in the murder. Following Witcher's death, Jesse is consumed by fury. Few things incense him more than being pursued, yet with time, Jesse's anger subsides. He then makes the decision to marry his first cousin, Z. Mims, with whom he will later have 2 children. Even during their honeymoon, it's rumored that he and his gang carried out several stagecoach robberies. Jesse James, it seems, wastes no time. Meanwhile, Alan Pinkerton receives news of Witcher's demise. This marks one of his most significant setbacks. Determined to avenge Witcher, Pinkerton takes the case personally and sets his sights on Jesse. Despite Pinkerton's pursuit, the James Younger gang continues their spree of robberies, successfully targeting a train near Muncie, Kansas on December 8, 1874. They make off with a staggering loot of $30,000, equivalent to $750,000 today. At the age of 27, Jesse James has undoubtedly established himself as one of the most successful outlaws of his time. Jesse James had become a household name across the nation, thanks in no small part to the glorification of his exploits by Edwards in his newspaper. With a loving wife by his side and the apparent defeat of the formidable Pinkerton agency, it's understandable that he might have felt invincible. But the game was far from over. His long-standing adversaries were plotting their retaliation. Following the murder of Joseph Witcher and Pinkerton's humiliating failure, Alan Pinkerton refused to accept defeat. The esteemed head of the renowned detective agency was determined to pursue Jesse James by any means necessary, even if it meant operating outside the bounds of the law. The fateful night of January 25, 1875, saw a group of Pinkerton agents acting on Pinkerton's orders surround James's farm. They threw a bomb intending to apprehend Jesse. However, the explosion had catastrophic consequences. Zerelda James, who was present that night, suffered severe injuries, losing her right arm, which had to be amputated. Tragically, Jesse's 8-year-old half-brother Archie perished in the aftermath. Remarkably, Jesse and his brother Frank had left the premises just hours before the explosion, narrowly escaping the Pinkerton agent's grasp. Learning of the devastation caused by the bomb, Jesse's simmering anger boiled over. To him, Alan Pinkerton and his agents represented the oppressive forces of the North, the epitome of evil who flouted the law in the service of corporate interests. The lack of accountability for the agents involved in the raid only fueled Jesse's thirst for revenge even further. Jesse's thirst for revenge wasn't quenched yet. On April 12, 1875, he took matters into his own hands and shot Daniel Askew, a neighbor of the James farm who had aided Pinkerton detectives during the raid. This act marked a decisive blow against Alan Pinkerton, prompting him to abandon the pursuit of the James Younger gang. Jesse had defied Pinkerton like no one else before, tarnishing his once formidable reputation. With Pinkerton out of the picture, the outlaws continued their heists. Their next target, a train near Otterville, Missouri. The gang, consisting of Jesse and Frank James, Cole and Bob Younger, Clell Miller, Charlie Pitts, Bill Chadwell, and a newcomer named Hobbs Carey, successfully pulled off the robbery on July 7, 1876, making off with approximately $18,300. But the motive behind this robbery was not solely financial gain. The outlaws had a larger scheme in mind, a bank robbery in Minnesota. Despite the risks involved, just a month after the train robbery, they were preparing to execute their plan. Their objective was clear: to strike at the heart of their enemies. This long-anticipated operation was set in motion, marking the next chapter in the saga of the James Younger gang. The date is set for September 7, 1876, and Jesse James and his cohorts are en route to a quiet town in Minnesota. The audacious plan to rob the First National Bank in Northfield was conceived by Jesse James and Bob Younger. Despite objections from Frank James and Cole Younger, who tried in vain to dissuade their younger brother, Jesse's thirst for vengeance knew no bounds. Their target, though unexpected, held symbolic significance. The rural bank associated with Adelbert Ames, the Unionist governor of Mississippi, represented an emblem of Northern power in enemy territory. The bandits, including Jesse, Frank, Cole, Jim, and Bob Younger, Clell Miller, Charlie Pitts, and Bill Chadwell, devised a meticulous plan to execute the heist. Dividing into 3 groups, they allocated specific roles: one team to infiltrate the bank, another to stand guard outside, and a third to secure their escape route. Jesse, Frank, and Bob volunteered for the risky task of entering the bank, while Cole Younger and Clell Miller positioned themselves outside to monitor the surroundings. Meanwhile, Jimmy Younger, Charlie Pitts, and Bill Chadwell took up positions at the rear to cover their retreat. Their plan unfolded with precision as Jesse's group entered Northfield, crossing the bridge into the town square around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Cole Younger and Clell Miller followed suit, ensuring that the stage was set for Jesse's group to strike at the heart of the bank. Once Cole and Clell reached the outside of the building, Jim's group entered Northfield to cover the retreat route. The plan was clear: After completing the robbery, the bandits would converge at the designated exit point. Bill, Clell, and Bob would then dismantle the telegraph lines before the gang made their escape. Importantly, it was decided that no citizen would be harmed during the heist. If fired upon, the bandits were instructed to only wound in return, ensuring no fatalities. With everything in place, the bandits sprang into action. At 2 o'clock sharp, Jesse, Bob, and Frank entered the First National Bank, leaving the door oddly ajar. As Cole and Clell arrived, they noticed the door and promptly closed it, assuming everything was in order. While Cole tended to his horse in the middle of the street, Clell casually smoked his pipe outside the bank, maintaining a lookout. Meanwhile, Jim, Charlie, and Bill reached their position at the exit point, silently waiting on their mounts. Inside the bank, Jesse and his accomplices located the employees: Alonzo Bunker, the teller, Joseph Lee Haywood, the acting cashier, and Frank Wilcox, the bookkeeper. Immediately, they brandished their guns and aimed at the employees. "Hands up! We're here to rob the bank, and if you make a sound, we'll blow your damn brains out," Jesse commanded. The trio of outlaws vaulted over the counter, demanding to know if Haywood was the cashier. When Haywood denied it, Jesse turned his attention to him, insisting, "You're the cashier? Now open the safe, you son of a bitch!" However, Haywood refused to comply. Meanwhile, Frank made his way towards the vault while Bob kept the other employees covered. As Frank attempted to enter the room, Haywood tried to block him by throwing himself at the door. Although Frank managed to evade the attack, he sustained injuries to his arm and hand. In response, Bob struck Haywood with the butt of his gun, causing him to collapse to the ground. Outside the bank, the situation wasn't any better. 2 alert citizens of Northfield noticed Cole Younger and Clell Miller's suspicious behavior and approached the establishment. Clell quickly intercepted one of them, grabbing him by the collar to prevent him from interfering. Despite their efforts to contain the situation, one of the citizens had already glimpsed the unfolding events through a bank window. "You son of a bitch, don't you holler!" Clell admonished the citizen as he released him outside the bank, a grave mistake that would soon have consequences. The warning spread quickly among the residents of Northfield. "Get your guns, guys! They're robbing the bank!" Clell, realizing his error, opened fire on the citizen, narrowly missing his head. Chaos erupted as Cole and Clell mounted their horses and charged through the streets, shouting to their accomplices inside the bank while firing into the air to signal the alarm. Jim, Bill, and Charlie rushed to the scene, firing warning shots to deter the townspeople. But their efforts were in vain. Armed citizens of Northfield began to return fire, bullets whizzing through the air in all directions. Inside the bank, the situation was no less tense. The first group struggled to open the safe, while Haywood, still reeling from Bob's blow, lay on the floor. Jesse, growing increasingly frustrated, knelt beside him, brandishing a knife and threatening to slit his throat if he didn't cooperate. Haywood, trembling with fear, explained that the safe was equipped with a timer and couldn't be opened. Unaware that the safe was actually unlocked, Jesse ordered Bob to collect whatever money he could find, while Frank kept a watchful eye on Wilcox. Bunker, the teller, seized the opportunity to escape through the back door, but Bob pursued him, firing a shot that grazed his shoulder. Despite his injury, Bunker managed to flee, shouting for help as he ran. As Cole hurried past the bank, he shouted to Jesse, Frank, and Bob, "Hurry up! They've raised the alarm!" Bullets continued to fly in all directions as Cole fought back as best he could. Spotting a young man frozen in fear in the street, Cole bellowed at him to get the hell off the street. But the young man, a Swedish immigrant who didn't understand English, remained paralyzed and was tragically shot in the head, succumbing to his wounds a few days later. Meanwhile, Clell Miller rushed to the bank to urge Jesse and the others to hasten their escape. However, as he mounted his horse, he was struck by gunfire, causing him to scream in agony but defiantly return fire with his revolvers. Both Cole and Jim sustained gunshot wounds to their left shoulders. Inside the bank, Jesse seethed with fury. He had narrowly missed Haywood with a shot that grazed the cashier's head, but the chaos proved too much for Bob, who abandoned the robbery, fleeing with his bag of money. Jesse followed him outside, with Frank closing the door behind them. As they emerged from the bank, Frank witnessed Haywood rising to his feet, pulling out a small-caliber pistol and aiming it at him. Reacting swiftly, Frank fired, ending Haywood's life. Mounted on their horses, Jesse and Frank galloped down the street, dodging bullets that still filled the air. The botched robbery left Clell Miller and Bill Chadwell dead, and the gang had managed to steal only a paltry sum of $26. Their troubles were far from over. The failed heist sparked one of the largest manhunts in United States history, as the people of Northfield vowed to capture the outlaws and bring them to justice. News of the hunt spread across the country, mobilizing over 1,000 individuals in pursuit of the James Younger gang. The fugitives spurred their horses southward, pushing them to their limits in a desperate bid to escape. Yet, after a grueling week on the run, their mounts exhausted and their situation dire, they were forced to abandon their steeds and continue on foot, trudging westward. The Younger brothers bore injuries, their coats lost to the elements, and hunger gnawed at their bellies. With no other choice, the bandits made the difficult decision to split into two groups, Jesse and Frank forging ahead while the rest followed behind. Despite their exhaustion, the James brothers pressed on relentlessly, their determination driving them toward the safety of Dakota Territory. After traversing hundreds of unforgiving miles and evading countless pursuers, Jesse and Frank emerged from the ordeal unscathed, but their comrades were not as fortunate. Charlie Pitts, Bob, and Cole Younger, weakened by hunger and worn down by their escape, fell into the hands of the authorities. A violent confrontation ensued, resulting in Charlie Pitts' death, while the Younger brothers, gravely injured, faced a lifetime behind bars. Throughout their imprisonment, the Younger brothers remained steadfastly loyal to the Jameses, refusing to betray them. Under assumed identities, Jesse and Frank spent the next 3 years living quietly in Nashville, Tennessee. For Frank, this new life as a farmer brought a sense of fulfillment and contentment. Struggling to adjust to his new life, Jesse James finds himself unable to shake off his desire for revenge. Despite experiencing a major setback, he reforms a gang and returns to his life of crime, albeit without his brother Frank, who opts for partial withdrawal. However, Jesse's new gang lacks the seasoned expertise of his former comrades, leading to internal strife and swift capture. With his notoriety still widespread, Jesse becomes increasingly suspicious of his associates, even resorting to violence against one of them. In the spring of 1880, he crosses paths with two young brothers from Missouri, Charlie and Robert Ford. Forming a bond with Charlie, Jesse recruits him into the gang, and together they continue their spree of robberies. As the gang dwindles in numbers, leaving only Jesse and Charlie Ford, the bounty on Jesse's head remains a constant threat. With the need for a trustworthy accomplice paramount, Jesse turns to Charlie's brother, Robert Ford, to join their ranks for an upcoming bank heist in Platte City. Unbeknownst to Jesse, Robert Ford has been secretly negotiating with the governor of Missouri, Thomas Crittenden, who has made capturing Jesse his top priority. Promised a hefty reward, Robert agrees to betray Jesse and assist in his capture. With trepidation, Robert confides in his older brother Charlie about their dangerous task. Despite their fear, the Ford brothers press on, waiting for the opportune moment to execute their plan. On April 3, 1882, as Jesse and the Ford brothers prepare for their bank robbery in Platte City, they gather for breakfast at the James House in St. Joseph, Missouri. Afterward, Jesse and Charlie tend to the horses in the barn before returning to find Robert in the living room. As Jesse begins to feel uncomfortable in his attire, he removes his coat and unbuttons his vest, tossing them onto his bed. Loudly, he declares his intention to remove his pistols, fearing they may be noticed if he walks around the yard. This moment sets the stage for the unexpected betrayal about to unfold. As Jesse James begins to unwind, he unbuckles his belt and places his guns on the couch, unaware of the impending betrayal. With his wife Z and children nearby, he casually turns his attention to a painting in the living room, dusting it off. Suddenly, a familiar sound pierces the air. The distinct click of a revolver's hammer being cocked. In a split second, Jesse whirls around, but it's too late. Robert Ford has already pulled the trigger, and the bullet strikes Jesse just behind the head. With his death, Robert and Charlie Ford have succeeded in killing America's most wanted man, sending shockwaves across the nation. News of Jesse James's assassination spreads like wildfire, drawing over 2,000 mourners to his funeral in hopes of catching a glimpse of his body. Though many had considered him a hero, his death under such circumstances transforms him into a martyr in the eyes of many. Following the murder, the Ford brothers surrender to authorities and are charged with first-degree murder. They plead guilty, receiving a death sentence by hanging. However, Governor Crittenden grants them a pardon on the same day, leading to their escape to Missouri. Despite their notoriety, Charlie Ford succumbs to tuberculosis and morphine addiction, taking his own life in 1884. Robert Ford, forever marked as the coward who murdered Jesse James, meets a similar fate a decade later, shot in a living room. His killer receives a life sentence but is later pardoned after a petition garners support for his release. In the aftermath, Frank James surrenders to authorities and faces trial for murder in Missouri, marking the end of a turbulent era in American history. He will be acquitted in all 3 trials he faces, allowing him to retire peacefully to his family's farm. In 1915, he passes away in the very room where he was born. His wife, however, meets a different fate, dying alone and impoverished. Jesse James emerges as a figure of complexity, far more than just a common outlaw driven by greed. His actions were fueled by a deep sense of political conviction and a desire for vengeance against those who had wronged him. Through his life, Jesse exemplifies how the tumultuous conflicts of an era and the personal journey of an individual can profoundly shape one's character. His story, tragic yet captivating, will continue to be recounted with fervor for generations to come. With the conclusion of our journey through the Wild West, I extend my gratitude for your time and attention. If you enjoyed this tale, please consider liking and sharing the video. For those interested in acquiring a poster or illustration of Jesse James, visit my store displayed on the screen or my Typee, with all links provided in the description. Your support on the previous video has been invaluable, and I deeply appreciate your comments and feedback. Constructive criticism is always welcome as it helps me improve. Until we meet again, take care and farewell.